My name is Rad Hazard, and I am the leader of the radical movement. Now, to completely understand what that means, what that embodies, the radical movement, you have to understand its origins, its lineage, its legacy. The radical movement started in 2009. Some people might not remember them, some people might remember it fondly. Either way, it changed the status quo of backyard wrestling forever, and is the reason why Battleborn Wrestling and Global Backyard Wrestling News, the top two alliances at the time, unified to form what we enjoy today as the Global Backyard Wrestling Nation. It all started on June 16th, 2009, which, quite frankly, was the worst day of my life. I can't overemphasize that. On that day, Tara Calloway decided to move on from our relationship, and we had broken up. And it was devastating to me. It changed everything about me. To this day, it changed my core. Rad Hazard fell off the face of the earth for about 2 weeks. There were no messages, there were no videos, there was nothing from Rad Hazard. I had become a ghost. I had disappeared. During those 2 weeks, I just had a lot of time to sit back and think about my life and think about not just myself, but how backyard wrestling had affected others. Tara Calloway decided to leave because, specifically, I had put Battleborn Wrestling before her. And how many other people had put wrestling before a friendship or a relationship or whatever the case may be. And they've all been hurt by that. They've been injured, they've been broken up, they've lost their best friends. It's happened over and over again in this circuit. And so, on June 26, 2009, I decided to make a video message declaring war on backyard wrestling. Now this is where it begins. This is where the behind the scenes really comes in. I never intended to destroy backyard wrestling. That's impossible. You can't destroy a hobby. The point was to make everyone think that I had gone nuts. That losing her had made me insane. Because rather than try to negotiate or talk it out or try to, come up with some sort of term to fix things, they just went, well, Rad Hazard's nuts. We gotta do something. Nobody ever tried to communicate with me. Ever. They just assumed I was with Rad or I'm against Rad. And that's exactly what I wanted. Within a month, the radical movement had grown strong. We had numerous members all over the country, as well as a pretty thick resistance of backyard wrestlers all over the place. This is where the next step came in. I offered $5,000 to any champion in backyard wrestling who would vacate their championship. This seemed like a pretty simple process, but it was devastating to some backyard wrestling organizations as champions began to drop their belts in an instant or win them and drop them for the money. Numerous federations fell during this time, showing the power of the radical movement, which is also why we garnered the attention of the elite faction in backyard wrestling at the time, Dark Star. Almost every member holding a championship. Now, Dark Star had originally been almost an unfavorable faction, feuding with the conspiracy theory kids. These two had been battling and battling and battling. Suddenly, the radical movement hits the scene, and they both go after us. Specifically Dark Star, though, and their leader, FX. At Westfest, on day 2, August 22nd, 2009, I had captured the Battleborn Wrestling United States Championship for the very first time. And I challenged FX to a title-for-title Iron Man match. 3 belts were on the line that day. The US title, the Battleborn Wrestling World title, and the Global Backyard Wrestling News World title. And yes, that match went to a draw, but there were numerous pros and cons from the event. For one, we had shown that we were at least equal, if not better, than Dark Star. We were a viable threat that even the elite in backyard wrestling couldn't completely contain. and that scared the hell out of a lot of people. The con of it all was that within the midst of all of this, I had begun to talk over our relationship with Tara Calloway yet again. And I thought things were finally starting to get patched up, and she actually became co-leader of the radical movement. But I found out that it was all a ruse. She was actually working for Darkstar the whole time, and she hit me over the head with a championship belt in order to show her allegiance to the elite of Darkstar. But the war raged on, and Phase 2 had come into play. Now, I had never said completely on camera, but I had a plan, a 3-phase plan. And Phase 2 was to kickstart Phase 3. You see, I had spread fear throughout backyard wrestling, but the Midwest had yet to be contained by the radical movement. The weekend of October 24th and 25th led Rad Hazard and the radical movement to Anderson, Indiana for ICW Midwest Extravaganza. On that day, Fokelin, former leader of the Conspiracy Theory Kids, joined the movement, as well as 2 other men, Bone Crusher and Johnny Light, Imminent Danger. Now the reason behind this was very simple. For one, I wanted to get revenge on Fokelin. Fokelin took my offer to be in the radical movement and threw it aside. Thought of it as nothing because he was the leader of CTK. And on that day, he wanted to be a part of my movement. Sure, I'll let him in, buddy. And I did. Only to betray him. Something that I felt needed to be done. Just to give him a taste of his own medicine. Now, since then, who knows, maybe we've patched things up. I don't think, our relationship or whatever there may be there isn't as bad. But we'll just have to see about that in the future. He is the leader of the Awakening, after all. So anyway, there I was at ICW, and even though I was unable to capture the Battleborn Wrestling North American title, that wasn't the purpose of the event. The purpose of the event was very simple. To have Johnny Light and Bone Crusher betray me and take over as the leaders of the radical movement. Ah! I see what you're thinking. What, that was all planned? Yes! That was Phase 3 in our little plan. Yes. You see, after Johnny Light and Bone Crusher betrayed me, the backyard wrestling world felt so sorry for Rad Hazard. Oh, it's so, no. Yeah, they felt so bad for me because I had lost everything. I didn't expect to lose the United States Championship to the pen name, but things happen, and not every war is without obstacles, but either way, that was when Rad Hazard started to stop being insane and started being a sympathetic character. Suddenly, the remnants of Battleborn Wrestling and Global Backyard Wrestling News began to talk to me, and I talked back. This was the plan all along, to unify both alliances into one organization, because I had held power in Battleborn Wrestling, but I felt that only I could save backyard wrestling from the monotony that it had gone into. That only I knew how backyard wrestling should run. The right way backyard wrestling should run. And lo and behold, both sides agreed that I had turned a new leaf and should be chairman of everything. Global Backyard Wrestling News and Battleborn Wrestling merged to become the Global Backyard Wrestling Nation, with Rad Hazard as its chairman. All part of the plan, and all thanks to the success of the radical movement, which outlasted both Darkstar and CTK, might I add. Now, a couple of weeks after my induction as chairman of the Global Backyard Wrestling Nation, you might have noticed the radical movement began to disperse. Suddenly, Johnny Light and Bone Crusher were nowhere to be found, and other members began to flounder and do their own thing. It wasn't because the radical movement was breaking down. It was because they were getting their rewards. I'd given everyone some luxurious perks, some of which, like Bone Crusher and Johnny Light, the true heroes of the original radical movement, decided to take and retire from backyard wrestling altogether, and I thank them for what they've done. But as time goes on, I realized something. Yes, the original radical movement was successful in changing the status quo of backyard wrestling. And once again, with this new radical movement, the radical movement of 2011 and onward into 2012, we will have a new era of backyard wrestling yet again. Once again, the status quo will change. And once again, unbeknownst to all of you, you won't have a clue what's happening until it's already over. Backyard wrestling world, global backyard wrestling nation, just like before, there's no way to stop us. The radical movement is always 2 steps ahead. So just sit back, relax, and deal with it.